Welcome back. All right, I'm wearing Sabres for this because I'm going to be optimistic that the Sabres end up on this board by the end of the year. So, if the playoffs started today, this is how they would look. And I thought about, well, I'll go through by percentages. No, we'll just go by how the standings have everything right now and how they look, because a lot of the questions in the live stream today were, what do you think of? What do you think of? What do you think of? So, what better way to show how I feel that teams are playing? And again, this is where like a power rankings, which shows how I feel a team's playing from 1 through 32, differs from a playoff series. A best of 7 series is very different. That's why the power rankings do not exist in the playoffs, because it is a whole other beast. It's like your power rankings. It's like a President's Trophy. You win the power rankings for the season. Kudos to you. And now the real work begins, right, with the playoffs. So since we're a little bit past the halfway mark, what I've done as well is I've got an asterisk next to teams that missed the playoffs last year that are above the playoff line right now. So there's only one team above the playoff line in the East that was not last year, and that's New Jersey. And there's been conversation about whether or not they're going to stay there. Florida's the one that's below the line that was in last year, and of course they won the President's Trophy. So how's that for a jinx? They didn't even make the playoffs the year after. Although again, we've got half a season left for them to change it. Then in the West, you have 3 teams. You've got Winnipeg, who had a down year and they're back. You've got Vegas, had a lot of injuries. They're back in the playoffs. And you've got Seattle, who had a rough first year. Their second year has been great. So the 3 teams that are out of the playoffs that were in last year for the West at this point are St. Louis, Nashville, and Colorado. So what's interesting here is that 2 of the 3 that join the playoffs are from the Pacific. 2 of the 3 that fall out are from the Central. I think the difference between the Central and the Pacific has started to drop off a bit. So what we're going to do from here, I'm going to go ahead and make my picks. And we'll go East, we'll go West, and then we'll bring them together. So first off, you've got Carolina and the Capitals. Now, we've seen these guys in the playoffs before. The Capitals have been red hot lately. Do they end up in a wild card spot at the end of the year? Maybe, but at any rate, if the playoffs started today, they would get a shot at Carolina. I like Carolina's team a little bit better. I don't think the difference between these teams is as big as it would have been, say, a couple months ago. But I still think, for me anyways, I'm going to say that the Canes win that series. Now, I don't know in how many games, and again, this is just for fun at the middle of the season, but I still think they win that. Then you've got the Devils and the Rangers. Now, for the Devils, they're a young team, inexperienced when it comes to the playoffs. These teams can struggle. The New York Rangers, a team that made the Final Four last year, and honestly have been playing really well lately. They've been exchanging that spot with New Jersey back and forth over the last couple of weeks. I actually still like the Rangers to win that series there. So, Canes, Rangers, there you go. Now we get to the Atlantic. Now, Pittsburgh switches over to this division and ends up playing Boston because you have 5 Metro teams and 3 Atlantic teams. Now, Pittsburgh hasn't won in the first round since 2019, right? 2018 was the last time they got out of the first round. Their issues with getting out of the first round have been documented. I want to say they're due for this one, although they're against Boston, but that's the thing. Boston's only lost 5 games in regulation so far. I would take Boston in that series. I think it would be close. I don't think it would be a sweep, but I think Boston wins that series. I think they're better offensively. I think they're better defensively and slightly better in net. I say slightly because if Jari's healthy, I don't think the difference between Ullmark and Jari is quite as wide as the stats would tell you. But at any rate, I still take Boston to win that. Then you get into Toronto and Tampa. Keeping in mind how they're playing right now, how things are going right now, and the fact that Tampa Bay struggles to win on the road. Now, they don't have home ice in this. I'm going to cause a lot of people to say, are you kidding me? But this is the thing. It's the middle of the season, so I can write down Toronto winning in the first round, and there you go. I think that if the playoffs started today, that this is the 4 teams we would see in the East in the second round. So I do think Toronto, if the playoffs started today, would beat Tampa. The playoffs don't start today. And of course, that's the conversation point, right? Is when the playoffs start and the fact that halfway through the season, yeah, teams are doing well, but how much have they proven to this point? So I'll come over to the West and we'll do the first round in the West. Agreed? Agreed. Cool. All right, so we have the Jets and we have the Flames. I understand, too, that this is a much smaller bracket on this side than on this side. I always have that problem when I split the board in half. And I didn't want the logos on the very right because then they're behind my head. So Winnipeg against Calgary, this series could be absolutely fantastic if this is what happens. So I'd love to see a Battle of Alberta. But if I can't get a Battle of Alberta, why not see the Flames switch over to the other division as a wild card and play against Winnipeg? That being said, you have Hellebuck. I don't see the Flames winning that series. You look at today's game against Dallas, a huge lead, and then they end up giving up 4 goals to make it really close. They win it, but again, with Calgary, there's been issues this year. Winnipeg, I think, is just a stronger team. Then you have Dallas and the Minnesota Wild. Dallas makes me nervous. Dallas, and today's game's a good example. Like, yeah, they had a huge comeback, but they were way behind. So for me, I look at the fact they were behind 6-1. There's things that make me nervous. But against Minnesota, I do like their chances against Minnesota. So how am I doing with picking guys that are not the top seeds? I'm doing terrible at picking teams that aren't the top seeds, but I don't think Minnesota wins this. So I'll go with Dallas. Now, Winnipeg currently is the division leader because they've got a game in hand on Dallas. So that's why Dallas is in the 2-3 spot with Minnesota. That would be a really good series, though. It would be a lot of fun because you've got the former Minnesota North Stars against the current Minnesota Wild. I will never not like that series. Then you've got Vegas against the Oilers. The Oilers, of course, currently without Kane, which if he was in against Vegas, we've seen in the past that Evander Kane and the Vegas Golden Knights don't really like each other very much. And I think that would be a very fun first round. With the Edmonton, I think to myself, okay, so it's Skinner on one side, you've got Thompson at the other. There's some real uncertainty there because neither of them have a playoff resume at the NHL level. And both teams have been fighting through injuries. This is a tough one. I'm trying to talk my way through it here. I do like McDavid. I think Edmonton pulls off the upset. I can't go through and keep picking all the top seeds. So I like Edmonton there. And then you've got LA against Seattle. Seattle has shown this year that they can beat LA. Seattle's on quite the heater. LA's playing well too. The goaltending at both ends, and this is the interesting thing. You've got the goaltending at both ends where who would be your starter for the playoffs? Okay, you have Martin Jones at one end. Maybe. Is it Jones? Is it Grubauer? If Drieger comes back, could it be Drieger? And then on the LA side, so Copley's the starter in the playoffs, Quick's the backup. Would that really happen? Or would the Kings say, okay, it's playoff time, it's Quick's turn, and Quick goes in? Either way, I like Seattle in that one. So there's two. The Pacific, I've said that the teams that are the road teams end up winning those series. So 6 out of 8, I'm picking the team that's the top seed. I'm not being very courageous in my picks. But remember last year when I did my bracket, I was right on 15 out of 16 series. Or 14 out of 15 series. You can't have 16 series because you can't eliminate 16 teams. But again, every year is different. I don't expect to do that again. It's one of those things that happens. It's like an eclipse, right? It happens every now and then. You can't go outside every year expecting another one. So the Canes against the Rangers, coming back to the East. Man, this would be a fantastic series. I'll say the Canes get a measure of revenge here. The Canes end up moving on. And I say that despite the Canes kind of having the same problem with goaltending that I just talked about down here. And the fact that it's Igor Shesterkin. But I'll say I'm an optimist and that the Canes can pull off a huge turnaround win. Boston and Toronto. This is hard for me because Toronto's lost a lot of series against Boston. Sure, yep. Go back to 2013, yes. But they're always close. And Toronto, as much as we want to talk about 2004 being the last time they got out of the first round and everybody takes, a victory lap on them, and I genuinely at this point feel like Toronto is due for a run. I'm not saying a Stanley Cup final is in the offing, but they're really due for a run. You got Ullmark at one end of the ice, probably Matt Murray at the other. Yep. But Boston's only lost 5 games in regulation. They're against Toronto tonight, too. So either way, this is one of those ones where either I pick the team that wins and people are like, wow, look at that, he's right. Or I pick the team that loses and be like, see, nope, he jinxed him. He jinxed him by picking him. I can't go against Boston in that one. And I on some level, I want to see Toronto succeed because, again, I think the narrative that this team can't succeed. Now, I understand why it's there because in deciding games, in 7th games, 5th games, In the case of the series against Columbus, they don't do well. You have to win the series if you're Toronto in 5 or 6. So it's like the complaining we heard about Stamkos. The Stamkos, so he isn't any good in Game 7s. He can't perform in Game 7s. And then Tampa Bay wins series in 4, 5, or 6. So it doesn't matter if he doesn't do well in Game 7s if you don't let the series get that far. So, yeah, I'm taking Boston there. So let me get to Winnipeg and Dallas. And as much as I would love to say Dallas, I can't. So look at that. 3 of the 4 are division winners. And as boring as that might sound on some level, I think if the Jets ended up in the conference final, I think Jets fans would be quite excited about that. So there's Winnipeg there, and then you got Edmonton against Seattle. You got McDavid at one end of the ice, but you've got a really good 4-line setup with Seattle. And the Kraken really, some exciting play right now. Edmonton's had their struggles. I'm going to say Seattle. I'm going to say Seattle comes out of the Pacific. And again, people can let me know in the comment section below how wrong I am. Again, this is just for fun, mid-season, right? So then you got the Canes against Boston. I don't have to think that hard on that one. The Canes, I think, have what it takes to beat the Boston Bruins. They did it last year, and I think they can do it again. I think they're one of the few teams that can shut down the Boston Bruins. So I'm not taking Boston to go to a Stanley Cup final and break my heart again. I'm saying they'll break my heart in the conference final. So I have Dallas out in the second round, Dallas out in the second round, and Boston out in the conference final. So yeah, at that point then, that's where, back before I had a channel, I would just be like, all right, well, I'm going to go back to playing the PlayStation. But yeah, so Winnipeg against Seattle. And I have to say, if that ended up being the conference final in the West, how much fun would that be? Like, seriously, how much fun would that be? I'm going to say Winnipeg. Connor Hellebuyck. I'll say Hellebuyck. Hellebuyck is right now looking like he could very well win the Vezina Trophy. Winnipeg has a really strong roster. They're apparently going to be aggressive at the deadline, which means they're not selling guys off. They're going to be picking guys up. We'll see how it works out. We'll see who they get, who they don't. Teams can say they'll be aggressive at the deadline too, and it doesn't necessarily mean there are a lot of moves made. It just means they're trying. They're doing their best. So then you've got Winnipeg against Carolina. At this point, Carolina would have home ice in that. So you'd have Game 1 and Game 2 are in Carolina. I'll say the Canes win Game 1. I'll say the Jets win Game 2. Game 3. That's in Winnipeg. Winnipeg struggles at home. I've noticed the whole whiteout thing, and if people get excited about Winnipeg at home. So I'll say the Canes take Game 3. Game 4... say the Jets even the series, so the series is going back to Carolina. This is where Carolina has to win at home, because if they don't, they're going to Winnipeg to fight for their lives. So the Canes win there, puts the pressure on the Jets for Game 6, and the Canes win the 2023 Stanley Cup. So that's my mid-season look at things, and again, my official prediction on the channel is Colorado over the Rangers in the final. Right now, that looks like that prediction is dead in the water, because Colorado, and there's all the injuries, and I know guys are going to come back, but they're putting themselves so far behind the 8 ball and so far below the playoff line. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to have this huge run in the second half that gets them into the playoffs. I wouldn't bet against it, but this is the bracket as we would have it right now. And I have the Canes winning the Stanley Cup final in 6 over the Winnipeg Jets. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Again, there are some really tough series in here, and I think it'd be a lot of fun to watch and see this. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And again, this is not meant to be taken like really super seriously. It's just a fun thing to do. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your bracket, who you think would win. And then we'll see at the end of the year how different the bracket looks. But it is interesting to see that the East has kind of settled back into the same teams that were in last year, minus the Florida Panthers. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.